2:17 a.m., Zaporizhzhia front. The sky goes quiet, not because the drones are gone, but because Russian electronic warfare has just flooded the spectrum. Screens inside Ukrainian FPV control bunkers turn to snow. GPS collapses. Command links vanish. On the Russian side, the conclusion is immediate. The air has been jammed, the threat neutralized, engines idle, crews relax, just for a moment. Then something breaks through the static. A low-flying FPV drone barely meters above the ground keeps moving. No GPS, no radio chatter. Just a camera, momentum, and a target that is now broadcasting its position like a lighthouse in the dark. If jamming was supposed to end the fight, why did this drone keep coming? From the earliest days of the war, Russia treated electronic warfare as a decisive advantage. Long before FPV drones began striking trenches and armored columns, Russian planners believed control of the electromagnetic spectrum could substitute for air superiority. If you could blind, deafen, and confuse the enemy sensors, the battlefield would tilt in your favor without firing a shot. That belief was not unfounded. Russian forces deployed layered electronic warfare units along the front lines designed to suppress GPS signals, disrupt command links, and sever the fragile connection between Ukrainian drone pilots and their aircraft. In theory, it was a perfect counter to Ukraine's growing reliance on unmanned systems. No signal meant no drone meant no strike. But Ukraine's dependence on FPV drones was not a tactical fad, it was a necessity. Lacking air dominance and outgunned in artillery, Ukraine turned to FPV drones as precision weapons of opportunity. Cheap, fast to assemble, and brutally effective, these drones filled the gap between reconnaissance and strike. They hunted tanks, artillery, supply trucks, and command vehicles with a flexibility no traditional weapon system could match. This set the stage for a quiet escalation. As FPV attacks increased, Russian EW systems were pushed closer to the front, forced to emit stronger signals over wider areas. The more drones appeared, the more aggressively Russia jammed. What began as protection slowly became exposure. Ukraine recognized this shift earlier than most observers. Drone losses mounted, but commanders noticed a pattern. Whenever jamming intensified, Russian positions became predictable. The electromagnetic spectrum itself was telling a story. Where power surged, something valuable was trying to hide. Instead of retreating from the jamming, Ukraine leaned into it. FPV drones were no longer just weapons, they became probes. Each failed flight mapped the invisible contours of Russian electronic defenses. Each burst of interference revealed distance, direction, and intent. Russia still believed it controlled the sky. Ukraine understood something more dangerous: control is never permanent, and every signal leaves a trace. The battlefield was no longer just land and air, it was the space in between where silence and noise could be turned into weapons. Ukraine's response to Russian jamming was not immediate retaliation, but preparation. FPV units began to operate under a new assumption: most missions would fail. Screens would go dark, control would be lost. Drones would crash before reaching their targets, and that was acceptable. Instead of trying to overpower Russian electronic warfare, Ukrainian operators treated it as a predictable reaction. Every time Russian jammers activated, they revealed themselves. Stronger interference meant stronger emissions, and stronger emissions meant clearer signatures for anyone listening carefully enough. Losses were no longer just casualties, they were data points. FPV teams adjusted their tactics accordingly. Flights were launched deliberately into known jamming zones, not to score hits, but to provoke a response. When video feeds collapsed, or command links dropped at specific distances, operators logged the moment. Patterns emerged. Certain sectors went dark faster than others. Some valleys were silent. Others screamed with interference. Over time, the invisible terrain of the electromagnetic battlefield took shape. At the same time, drone builders began stripping FPVs down to their essentials. GPS modules were removed or ignored. Autopilot functions were simplified. The final approach would rely on vision and inertia, not coordinates. Operators trained to fly low, sometimes less than 2 meters above the ground, using terrain roads and tree lines as guides. The goal was not elegance, but persistence. Deception became central to the plan. Decoy FPVs were launched first, forcing Russian crews to crank up jamming power. These drones were expected to die. Their purpose was to keep the jammers active, broadcasting continuously. Only after a mission stabilized did the real strike drones prepare to launch. Inside Ukrainian control bunkers, patience replaced urgency. Operators waited, listening to spectrum monitors and watching signal noise fluctuate. Silence became suspicious. Noise became confirmation. When the interference peaked and held steady, it meant one thing: the target believed it was safe. This phase was not about bravery or technological superiority. It was about discipline, knowing when to lose drones, knowing when not to launch, and most importantly, knowing that the enemy's confidence in their electronic shield was the final ingredient required to break it. The moment Russian electronic warfare reached full power, the trap closed. Along the Zaporizhzhia front, multiple jamming systems were now active at once. GPS interference stretched for kilometers. Command links collapsed in overlapping bubbles. To Russian crews inside the EW vehicles, this was dominance, the electromagnetic equivalent of air superiority. The spectrum was saturated. Nothing should have been able to fly through it. But saturation has a cost. Each jammer had to emit continuously to be effective. Antennas radiated outward, pumping energy into the air, fighting every signal they could detect. What the crews could not see from inside their armored trucks was how visible they had become. On Ukrainian monitors, the electromagnetic noise was no longer abstract. It had shape, direction, depth. The source was no longer hidden. No. Once emissions stabilized, Ukrainian units moved fast. The Strike FPV drone launched without ceremony. No radio chatter, no GPS log. The flight path was simple and brutal, low-altitude terrain following pre-planned turns memorized by the operator. For the first part of the flight, the screen remained a blizzard of static. The drone was flying blind, guided only by heading and speed, skimming dirt roads and tree lines at less than 3 meters above the ground. This was the most dangerous phase. Any mistake meant impact. Any unexpected obstacle meant failure. But the drone kept moving. As it crossed deeper into the jamming zone, something changed. The interference pattern shifted, not weaker, but narrower. The jammer was focused forward, trying to suppress threats it believed were still far away. That focus created a shadow. And inside that shadow, the video feed flickered back to life. First came the ground, then the road, then a metal mast cutting into the frame. The operator did not hesitate. There was no time. The EW vehicle was now visible, antennas extended, generator running, crew confident enough to remain stationary. They believed the sky was dead. The FPV accelerated. In the final seconds, there was no guidance, no calculation, no second chance, just a growing image of antennas and cables filling the screen. The jammer, broadcasting at full power, was doing exactly what it was designed to do, except now it was guiding its own destruction. The impact was immediate. Antennas sheared off. Equipment ignited. The emissions stopped instantly, like a light switched off mid-sentence. Across the sector, Ukrainian screens lit up as other FPV drones regained control almost simultaneously. What had been a sealed electronic dome fractured in seconds. Russian crews reacted too late. Shutting down the jammer after impact was meaningless. The damage was already done, not just to hardware, but to the illusion of control. The electromagnetic shield they trusted had become a beacon. This was the moment. Then this happened, truly meant something. Not a single strike, but a cascade. With the jammer gone, the sky reopened, and waiting just beyond the edge of interference were more drones already moving. The destruction of the jammer triggered an immediate shift across the front. What had been an invisible barrier collapsed in real time. Ukrainian FPV operators felt it first not as an explosion, but as clarity. Video feeds stabilized, control links snapped back into place. Drones that had been loitering at the edge of the jamming zone surged forward almost simultaneously. This was not coincidence, it was timing. With the primary EW system offline, Russian units in the sector were suddenly exposed. Artillery crews lost protection. Command vehicles that had relied on electronic cover were now visible and vulnerable. Within minutes, follow-on FPV drones adjusted course, exploiting the newly opened corridor in the electromagnetic spectrum. Russian air defenses attempted to respond, but they were late. Short-range systems designed to counter drones depended on early warning that had been degraded by their own reliance on jamming. Without the EW shield, reaction time stretched from seconds to minutes. That gap was enough. Multiple secondary strikes followed. A command vehicle was hit while relocating. An artillery position went silent after a direct FPV impact on its fire control equipment. Even units that escaped physical damage were forced to move braking coordination and slowing operations across the line. The most damaging effect, however, was psychological. Russian crews now faced an impossible dilemma: keep jammers active and risk becoming targets, or shut them down and invite drone swarms back into the air. Choice carried consequences. What Ukraine achieved was not just a tactical success, it was a temporary inversion of control. For a brief window, silence replaced noise, and the side that had been blinded moments earlier now dictated the tempo. The counterstrike was not louder than the jamming, but it was far more decisive. To understand why this worked, it's necessary to strip electronic warfare down to its fundamentals. Jamming is not invisibility, it is force. And force in the electromagnetic spectrum requires exposure. Russian EW systems suppress drones by overpowering their signals, flooding the air with noise across specific frequency bands. The stronger and wider the jamming bubble, the more energy must be emitted. That energy does not disappear. It propagates. And anything that propagates can be detected, measured, and localized. This is where FPV drones change the equation. Unlike larger UAVs, FPV drones do not rely on constant satellite navigation or complex data links to complete a mission. Their control loop is short, their latency is low. When GPS disappears, they can continue on heading. When command links degrade, momentum still carries them forward. In the final seconds, vision is enough. Ukrainian operators exploited this asymmetry. By accepting partial control loss early in the flight, they reduced their dependence on clean signals. The drone's most critical phase, the terminal approach, occurred inside the jammer's own emission footprint, where geometry favored the attacker. The jammer was designed to suppress signals coming in, not to protect itself from objects already inside the bubble. Cost further tilted the balance. A single Russian EW vehicle represents years of development, specialized crews, and hardware valued in the tens of millions of dollars. An FPV drone, by contrast, costs hundreds, sometimes less. Losing several drones to provoke jamming was not wasteful, it was economical. There is also a structural limitation. Jammers must choose priorities. Broad coverage weakens intensity. Focused output creates gaps. FPV teams learn to read these gaps in real time, treating interference patterns as terrain rather than obstacles. The result is a paradox. The more aggressively electronic warfare is applied, the easier it becomes to map, predict, and target. What was once protection turns into a signal flare. In this environment, drones do not need to defeat electronic warfare. They only need to survive it long enough to reach the source. The implications of this encounter extend far beyond a single destroyed jammer. What unfolded on the Zaporizhzhia front signals a structural shift in modern warfare, one where electronic dominance no longer guarantees safety and may instead invite attack. For Russian forces, electronic warfare has become a balancing act rather than a shield. Jammers can no longer remain active for long periods without risk. Emissions must be pulsed, relocated, or reduced, which in turn weakens coverage. Every decision creates vulnerability somewhere else. The battlefield becomes fragmented with pockets of protection rather than continuous control. For Ukraine, FPV drones have evolved from improvised weapons into strategic tools. They are no longer just used to destroy hardware, but to shape enemy behavior. By forcing Russian units to hesitate before activating jammers, Ukraine gains freedom of movement not only in the air, but across command logistics and artillery coordination. More broadly, this exchange highlights a growing trend: the weaponization of patience and adaptation. The side that accepts temporary blindness as limited losses and imperfect control gains an advantage over the side that demands dominance at all times. Electronic warfare is no longer about overpowering signals, but about managing exposure. This dynamic is not unique to Ukraine. Militaries around the world are watching closely. Any force that relies on constant emission radar jammers or sensors must now assume it can be targeted with precision by systems far cheaper than itself. The lesson is stark. In the age of FPV drones, the spectrum is not just contested, it is hunted. What happened on that night along the Zaporizhzhia front was not a technological fluke nor a lucky strike. It was the outcome of a deeper shift in how war is fought and understood. Russian electronic warfare did exactly what it was designed to do: it jammed the sky, and in doing so, it revealed itself. Ukraine did not defeat electronic warfare by overpowering it. They defeated it by listening, waiting, and accepting imperfection. FPV drones were not treated as precision instruments that must always succeed, but as expendable scouts in a much larger system. Some were lost. Many never reached their targets. Each failure narrowed the picture until silence itself became a guide. This is the uncomfortable truth modern militaries are now confronting. Power no longer guarantees control. Emission no longer guarantees dominance. Every signal, no matter how advanced, carries risk. And every attempt to blind the enemy carries the danger of being seen. The FPV drone that struck the jammer was not remarkable because of its technology. It was remarkable because of the thinking behind it. Cheap, simple, and adaptable systems used with discipline can dismantle even the most sophisticated defenses. The sky was never truly jammed. It was baited. And in a battlefield, where noise attracts fire, the future may belong not to those who shout the loudest, but to those who know when to stay quiet and when to strike. Bye for now.